to look at strategic position of the organization. Strategic position is concerned with the impact on strategy of the external environment and organization's strategic capability, that's resources and competencies, and the expectations and influences of stakeholders. So we're going to actually look at both external environment and internal environment of the organization. The starting point of the strategy is after you have developed your vision and mission statement, you need to conduct external environmental analysis. You need to do the external scanning to identify opportunities and threats coming from the external environment. As a manager, you do not have control over the external environment. So we call these external environmental factors uncontrollable factors. You don't have control, but you must be able to scan the external environment of the organization to identify opportunities and threats. And one of the models that we have used to do external environmental analysis is what we call the PESTEL, the PESTEL framework. The PESTEL involves the political factors, economic factors, sociocultural factors, technological factors, the physical environment, and the legal framework of the organization. So let us go through the macro environmental forces. So we have the political factors. As the manager, you don't have control over political decisions. However, there are several political decisions that can affect the performance of your business. We don't expect you as a manager to go and stand on a political platform because you think that if a particular political party wins the election, that is going to favor you. If you do that and that party does not win the election, you're going to have some challenges. So as a manager, you are not supposed to engage in active politics. However, you must be interested in the political decisions because whatever decisions they take can affect the performance of your business. You need to look at the philosophies of the party in power. For instance, going into the election year, the main political parties in the country, the two major ones, NPP and NDC, as a manager, you must know the philosophy of these parties so that you understand why they take certain decisions when they are in power. So, for instance, if you take NDC describe themselves as a social democratic parties. What does it mean? What are their party philosophies? They believe in state control. They believe that the state must have power and control and distribute the resources so that the poor can benefit. So they will tell you that they believe in the ordinary person on the street. The state must have access to the resources of the country so that they will be able to use it to provide infrastructure, facilities, roads, hospitals, schools, and what have you. So they believe in the state taxing more people, taxing more. So they believe in imposition of taxes on the businessmen so that the state can raise enough tax revenue to provide infrastructure facilities. So we shouldn't be worried or we shouldn't be surprised when NDC are in power and they impose more taxes. Because the idea is that the state must impose more taxes, tax the rich, and use it to support the poor. Whereas you take NPP, which is more of capitalists, they believe that the state must have minimal control. The state must rather create an enabling environment for private sector to develop. So they believe in the private sector development, but they believe that when you tax businesses less, then they will be able to make more profit. And the assumption is that when businesses are making more profit, then they reinvest their profit into the businesses, thereby growing their businesses When they are able to grow the businesses, then they will be able to employ more people so that the unemployed graduates can have jobs to do. So they believe in the state having minimal control. They believe in privatizing into the private sector. So they will tax less, whilst NPP will rather tax more because they want to generate more revenue for infrastructure development. So you realize that these two political parties, they are all talking about the interests of the ordinary Ghanaian in the street, but they differ in terms of their approach. So as a manager, you should understand these philosophies, and therefore, when Party A is in power, you know what is going to be the likely decision, and therefore you also plan to be able to survive under any party that comes to power. Okay. Having said that, you need to look at other political factors, increase in taxation, reducing disposable income, and what have you. These are all political decisions. The which government is likely to increase taxation, and which government is likely to reduce taxes. As a manager, you should be aware and you should be able to predict the likely move of such government when they are in power. I remember that when NPP were in power in 2007, President Kufuor removed taxes on importation of foreign rice because there were shortages of food in the country in 2007, and he thought that you should remove taxes so that the prices will come down for the ordinary Ghanaian to be able to buy. When such a decision was taken, the NDC were in opposition at that time. They were not happy because they thought that when you remove taxes on importation of foreign rice, then it will make foreign rices cheaper, and therefore consumers will buy more foreign rice, and it will affect the work of the local farmers because people will buy less of the local rice. So they disagree. But NPP were also of the view that food prices have gone up, and therefore to cushion the ordinary Ghanaian, we must remove taxes so that prices will come down. So when President Mills came to power in 2009, the first thing to do was to bring that taxes back. So that is the difference between the two parties. So as a manager, you must know the likely move of the politicians so that you can plan ahead and to be able to survive. The government decision on employment laws, health and safety issues, foreign trade agreements, stability of the political systems must all be a concern for a manager. Now we look at economic factors. Key economic measures, key component measures of the economy are inflation rate, interest rate, income levels, GDP, employment levels, exchange rates are all economic factors that can affect the performance of the business. Look at the interest rate in our country today. It increases the cost of doing business, and as a manager, how do you survive? If you are thinking of borrowing, it is going to add to your cost of doing business, and therefore that must be done with caution. You must do your cost-benefit analysis before you make such a decision. When employment levels are going down, dependency ratio goes up, and therefore if you were say drinking 3 bottles of Guinness on a weekend, it means that you have to reduce it to 1 bottle because you need to take care of your sister or your brother who has become unemployed and has become dependent on you. By cutting down your consumption of Guinness, what happens to the producer of Guinness? The demand is going down, and therefore they may have to close some 2 or 3 units. And by doing so, they cut down production, and therefore the government tax revenue from Guinness will also go down. You realize that it becomes a cyclical effect. It affects all parts of the economy. So as a manager, you need to take care of all the economic factors and analyze it very well and know their implication and how they can affect the performance of your business. Then you look at sociocultural factors. You need to look at the demographic characteristics of your customers, their age, sex, class, family life cycle, trends in age, and distribution. When you are developing a particular strategy, targeting, say, people who are predominantly poor people, then you need to look at what you are using to target them and your pricing strategy. If you are targeting people with low income, then of course you must be careful about your pricing. And therefore, when they are predominantly poor people, you need to implement something like the no-frills strategy, or there are people whose income, whose purchasing decisions are based on price rather than quality. And therefore, you must know the demographic characteristics of the people. You must also have to consider the tastes and preferences of the target market. Consumers' tastes and preferences keep on changing. And for that matter, you need to study the changing nature of the consumer's tastes, and you provide accordingly. So you need to consider the culture. You cannot just go to Zongo community and establish drinking spots there. You wake up in the morning to find the place burnt. So we need to consider the culture of the people, their demographic characteristics, their income levels, and you'll be able to develop appropriate strategy that will meet their condition. The culture includes the language, their religion, their values, law, healthcare, education, and so on and so forth. Then you need to also consider the technological factors. We are living in the world of technology, and to be able to survive, you must be abreast with the technological changes taking place within your industry. If you are not innovative enough to come out with appropriate technology that will help you to survive, your business will certainly collapse. And therefore, as a manager, you need to be familiar with the changes taking place as far as technology is concerned. Let's take the mobile phone industry. There are certain mobile phones. I remember my first mobile phone was called Segem. It was a German product. Ghana, Nokia was very popular. Today, where are they? Segem is gone. Nokia is no longer found in Ghana. So these are the technological changes, and as managers, you must follow the changes and to be able to survive. Otherwise, the business will always collapse. When we started communication in Ghana, maybe in the mid-90s, the people were establishing telecommunication centers across the country. Now, where are they? As a result of technology, those companies did not survive. So those who started, where are they? Were they able to adapt to the changes to be able to survive, or they just sat down and when people tastes and preferences change, they collapse? So we need to monitor the changes taking place as far as technology is concerned, and then you'll be able to survive. Then we must also look at the physical environment. The physical environment can also create problem for the manager. Now people are concerned about the environmental degradation. People are concerned about the pollution, and therefore you need to look at how the activities of your business affect the physical environment. Companies are now being taken to court, and they are paying heavy penalties because of how the activities have actually affected the business environment. So it is important that as a manager, you are concerned about how your activities will impact on the environment, and you need to factor that in your strategy So in order to avoid being dragged to court because you are polluting the environment. You need to also look at the legal factors. The legal framework within the country that you are operating. Issues to do with the minimum wage, maternity leave, statutory public holidays are all issues that the manager must abide by, because they are all legal factors, and failure to abide by them can bring about sanctions or penalties, or you could even go to court for breaking such laws. So issues on monopolies and mergers, competitive activities, unfair trading, consumer legislation, trade descriptions, health and safety issues, professional code of conduct must all be looked at in developing your strategy. So whilst going through all this external environmental analysis, you need to try to identify both opportunities and threats. But the business environment does not come with only threats, it also comes with opportunities. So you identify the opportunities, and then you identify all the threats coming from the external environment. Somewhere in 2006, Ghana identified oil in commercial quantities in the western region. When the announcement came, some people even doubted it. For others, we thought that once Ghana is going to produce oil in commercial quantities, oil were going to be cheaper than water in Ghana. We thought that we were going to buy petrol for free. So people were jubilating. While some of us were jubilating, others were looking for business opportunities. They started asking, where is it? Takoradi. So what are the business opportunities? People were thinking about transportation. Some people were talking about catering services. Some people were talking about hotel and accommodation. So you realize that whilst some of us were jubilating, others were buying lands in Takoradi. Others were putting up huge hotels. And today, if you go to Takoradi, hotel prices are even more expensive than Accra. But they were looking for business opportunities, and now they are making profit. Some people who took advantage and bought lands, the price of land in Takoradi has gone up significantly, and those people are now making money. So when you are analyzing the external environment of the business, you look for both opportunities and then threat. Let's quickly look at Porter's 5 forces. Michael Porter came out with his 5 forces analysis, and Porter's 5 forces is a micro-level analysis. He is of the view that the profitability of every business is dependent on 5 factors. In fact, his analysis was based on an industry rather than firms. The industry is made up of a collection of firms. And he argues that if you want to invest in any industry, you need to perform the 5 forces analysis. And if you perform the 5 forces analysis and there are favorable factors, then you can say that it's profitable to go and invest into that industry. If they are not favorable, then it means that you cannot invest in that industry. So the 5 forces analysis is used to measure the attractiveness or profitability of an industry. Porter's 5 forces analysis have been popular and has been used by managers across the world. Porter argued that the profitability of the industry is dependent on these 5 factors. The 5 factors are bargaining power of suppliers, bargaining power of customers, internal rivalry, threat of competitive rivalry, the threat for potential entrant, and threat of substitute. So Porter argues that the profitability of the industry depends on these factors. But now let's look at it. After I've gone through the 5 factors, the question that will follow and which you must be thinking about is, do you agree that the profitability of every industry is dependent on just these 5 factors? In examination situation, the question will not ask you to just describe the 5 factors by Michael Porter. That is too basic. But the question will be, do you agree that the profitability of the industry depends on just the 5 factors? Support your answer with a sound argument. So let us go through the 5 factors. Porter is saying that the profitability or the attractiveness of the industry depends on these 5 factors. And the first one is the threat for potential entrants. And he argued, in an industry where it is difficult for new entrants or a new player to enter, the industry becomes more profitable. Because if there are few people within the industry, then they can control prices, they can increase prices, and make the industry more profitable. On the other hand, if it is easier for new entrants to come in, then more people will enter because of the high profit. More people will enter, and by entering, the prices will go down, and the industry becomes less profitable. So Porter identified factors that could be used as entry barriers. And he mentioned the capital requirement. When the capital required to enter into a particular industry is very high, then it becomes difficult for new entrants to go into that industry. In this case, the industry becomes more profitable. For instance, we can think about the banking industry. Since independence, we have only 27 banks operating in Ghana because the capital requirement is very high. In this case, the industry becomes more profitable. On the other hand, the industry becomes less profitable when the capital requirement needed to enter into that industry is low. In this case, more players will enter into the industry competing for their profit, making the industry less profitable. So you can take the sachet water industry. Everybody is entering into the industry. So according to Porter, in such a situation, profits will go down, making the industry less profitable. Sometimes in some industries, it is difficult to get the license to operate. In such an instances, when the government have put restrictions on issues of licenses, the few players within the industry enjoy because of that entry barrier. So you can take the telecommunication industry. It can take you more than 2 years to get a license to start operation within the industry. So in the industry, the telecommunication industry in Ghana, we have just 6 players. In this case, the industry becomes more profitable. On the other hand, when it is easy for the players or individuals to get the license to operate in such an industry, then the industry becomes less profitable. Economies of scale. Existing organizations often have economies of scale, and therefore new entrants will struggle to achieve the same competitive economies in the short and medium term. In such an instances, when the existing players are enjoying the economies of scale, then it makes it difficult for new entrants to come, making the industry more profitable. Then access to distribution channels it may be difficult to gain access to the appropriate distribution channels due to competitive operations and network in the marketplace. So if you take Guinness Ghana or Coca-Cola, if Coca-Cola comes out with a new product today, within 1 week, the product could be found anywhere in the country, because when they are transporting their existing product, they add a new product and distribute to their various customers. But if you are a small operator in the non-alcoholic beverage and you come out with a new product, it will be more expensive for you transporting your product across the length and breadth of the country. In this case, it becomes difficult for you, and therefore the industry will become less profitable. So in an industry where the distribution channels have been well established, then it serves as a barrier to new entrants that want to come into the industry. Then we can also take brand loyalty as an entry barrier. In a brand loyalty market, it might be difficult to attract new customers, and therefore marketing spend could be quite considerable. So in an industry where customers are loyal, if new entrants are coming in, it becomes difficult for you to get customers. So in this case, the existing players will continue to enjoy more profit. So in a nutshell, Porter is arguing that when there are entry barriers, it makes it difficult for new entrants to come in, making the industry more profitable. On the other hand, when entry barriers are low, then new entrants can easily come into the industry, and in this case, the industry becomes less profitable. Now let's look at the bargaining power of buyers. The bargaining power of buyers is likely to be quite strong in the following instances. Where few buyers control a large volume of the market, then it becomes difficult. In a situation where few buyers control large volume of the market, then they will always control the industry. They will always want to dictate price, making the industry vulnerable. In this case, the industry becomes less profitable. On the other hand, when we have several buyers, then the industry will rather dictate the price and therefore can even restrict output, making the industry more profitable. And then also where there are a large number of suppliers fighting for a share of the market, again, the retail industry will be a classic example of this, particular in the food sector, grocery and meat market. The buyers become more powerful when we have few buyers buying a greater percentage of the industry's products. On the other hand, the buyers becomes less powerful when we have several of them. In this case, the industry becomes more profitable because they can dictate the price. Then we have bargaining power of suppliers. Suppliers becomes more powerful when we have few suppliers supplying to the industry. On the other hand, suppliers become less powerful when we have numerous suppliers supplying to the industry. In this case, the industry will tend to control the prices. But where we have few suppliers, then suppliers can also control the prices and can even restrict supply, making the industry less profitable. And then we have competitive rivalry. In an industry where we have several competitors, especially when competitors within the industry are homogeneous, there are no differentiation, then the competition is based on price rather than quality. So they compete on price, so it brings about price war within the industry. And when there are price wars, then competitors are always fighting based on price. You cut your price, and your competitor will also cut its price. And by cutting the prices, you are cutting your profit, making the industry more vulnerable and less profitable. On the other hand, when there is moderate competition or low competition, then the industry becomes more profitable. Then lastly, Porter talked about the threat of substitution. In an industry where there are no close substitutes, if there are no close substitutes, then the industry becomes more powerful. But if there are substitutes to the industry's product, then the industry becomes vulnerable. Let us take the cinema industry in Ghana. The industry is almost dead because consumers now have substitutes. I can buy my home theater or my home cinema setup and watch any movie in the house. Now there's availability of digital television where people can have access to various types of movies. So the demand for cinema in Ghana has gone down because of availability of close substitutes. So in an industry where consumers can have substitutes, then that industry becomes less profitable. On the other hand, if there are no close substitutes, then the industry becomes more relevant and more profitable. So in a nutshell, we can say that the competitive environment is unattractive when we have the following conditions. Rivalry is very strong. Entry barriers are low. Competition from substitutes is strong. Suppliers and customers have considerable bargaining power. In this case, we can say that the competitive environment is unattractive, and therefore it is not profitable to enter into such an industry. However, we can say that the competitive environment is attractive when we have the following conditions. When rivalry is only moderate, entry barriers are relatively high, there are no good substitute suppliers, and customers are in a weak bargaining position. The weaker the competitive forces, the greater an industry's profit. In this case, we can say that it is advisable to invest in such an instance. Invest in the industry. Now, let's look at the limitations of Michael Porter's model. Porter is arguing that the profitability of the industry depends on these 5 forces. The question is, do you agree? Support your answer with a sound argument. We can admit that Porter's 5 forces can determine the profitability of the industry. But from the external environmental analysis that we just considered, we can say that Porter's 5 forces are not the only factors that can determine the profitability of the industry. You have just looked at the PESTEL framework, the political decisions of the country, the stability of the country, government decision to impose or reduce taxes can all affect the profit. Economic conditions of the country, interest rates, GDP, employment levels, and exchange rate fluctuations can all affect the profitability of the industry. Sociocultural factors, if consumers' tastes and preferences change, then the demand for your product will go down and it can affect the profitability of the industry. We look at technological factors. If you are not using the right technology, you are not abreast with the appropriate technology within the industry, then, of course, you are going to lose to competitors. So all the external factors, the macro-environmental factors that we considered can affect the profitability of the business. And therefore, we can conclude that even though Michael Porter's 5 forces are important determinants of the profitability of the industry. They are not the only factors that can affect the profit. As we shall see very soon, the internal factors can also influence the performance. And this includes the technology that you have inside, the kind of employees you have. If you have employees who are not smiling towards customers, they are always going to drive away your customers and therefore making your business less profitable. So we look at the attitude of employees, the skills of the managers, the resources you have within the organization, the quality of your product, your brand name. These are all factors that can influence the profit of the industry. So the Michael Porter's 5 forces are not the only factors that can determine or that can be used to measure the attractiveness of an industry. So at this juncture, we will be moving on to internal factors of the business. So as we begin, we say that the 5 forces framework is not the only tool used to undertake the micro-analysis of an organization. Successful strategies are also dependent on the organizations having the internal strategic capability required for survival and success. So understanding the strategic capability is very important because an organization's strategic capability may be the leading edge of strategic development. New opportunities may be created by stretching and exploiting capabilities either in ways which competitors find difficult to match or to create quite new market opportunities, or both. So explanation of competitive advantage in terms of strategic capabilities is sometimes called the resource-based view of strategy. That is, the competitive advantage of an organization is explained by the distinctiveness of its capabilities. Let me give you a brief background. The earlier researchers focus on external analysis, looking at the macro-environmental factors and the 5 forces analysis to explain the profitability of the industry. But later on, a researcher like Penrose came up with the RBV, that's the resource-based view approach. Penrose conducted the research and concluded that it is not the external factors that determine the profitability, but rather the internal factors. So from then, Penrose's work has been taken up, developed by other researchers like Barney, Peteroff, and Teeth. And they have also concluded that it is not only the external factors that is used to determine the profitability, but internal factors can also be used to explain the profits of the organization. So we're going to look at how the strategic capabilities, which is an internal factor, can be used to determine the profitability of the organization. So strategic capability is defined as the adequacy and suitability of the resources and competencies of an organization for it to survive and prosper. So the strategic capability is made up of the resources and competencies that the organization have. So let us look at the 2 components of the resources of the strategic capability, that's the resources and competencies. These are the 2 components that determine strategic capability. And Johnson and Co. is arguing that these resources and competencies that you have in your organization must be adequate and must be suitable. What it means is that every business organization has some resources and some amount of competencies. But if these are not adequate, you cannot survive. You are going to collapse. So your resources must be your resources and competencies that you have must be adequate. You must have adequate resources in terms of capital, in terms of human resources, technology, and what have you. And the resources must also be suitable. Suitability of the resources and competencies means that I am teaching as a lecturer in the business school. I may be an important resource for the business school, but you cannot take me to biology or other physical sciences or medical school to teach. I may be important resources, but I may not be suitable there because I don't have the background to teach there. So it's saying that the resources and the competencies that we have must be suitable and must also be adequate. So let us look at the resources aspect of the definition, and then we look at the competencies aspect of the definition. According to Haidt, resources are input into a firm's production process, and this includes capital, equipment, the skills of individual employees, patents, finance, and talented managers. So strategic capabilities comprise tangible and intangible resources and competencies. Tangible resources are the physical assets of an organization, such as plant, labor, finance. In contrast, the intangible resources are non-physical assets such as information, reputation, and knowledge. Organization resources can also be considered in terms of physical resources, financial resources, human resources, and intellectual capital. Intellectual capital is an important aspect of the intangible resources of the organization. You realize that in our part of the world, we don't consider intellectual capital as an important resource. If you bring about 100 owners of small businesses and you ask them what their problems are, they are all going to talk about lack of access to credit. Yes, it is important, but the intellectual capital is very important resources, and this intellectual capital includes the brand name, the patent, customer database. If you recall, in 2012 election, Nana Akufo-Addo decided to take NDC to court because he said that she registered the umbrella in her name. If she had gone to court, and it is indeed true that she registered the umbrella in her name, you can imagine NDC going to an election without the umbrella. That would have been a disaster. So the patent right is considered as a very important resource of the organization. And you can also not forget about the importance of the brand name. The brand name is a very important resource. Many students have applied to KNUST not because of me or the other lecturers or the vice chancellor, but you came in because KNUST has a very strong brand name. So some of you have finished your polytechnics, you want to associate and have KNUST on your certificate. So even though our fees may even be high, we still prefer to come here because we want to enjoy the brand name of KNUST. So the brand name becomes a very important resource of an organization. Then also we look at the customer database. Customer database serves as a very important resource of the organization. And now some banks are doing well creating customer database. If you want to engage in relationship banking, you can only do so when you have a customer database. For the database will have the names, the addresses, telephone numbers, email addresses of your customers. So you can customize based on the analysis of the data information in the database. Then you will be able to know the characteristics of your customers. Then you'll be able to send them appropriate information about the new product that you have developed. So the customer database becomes very important resources of the organization. Now that we know about the resources, let us also look at the competencies aspect of the organization, of the definition of strategic capability. The term competencies is used to mean the activities and processes through which an organization deploys its resources effectively in a way that others cannot imitate. So in understanding strategic capability, the emphasis is then not just on what resources exist, but on how they are used. So the resources, the competencies is about how the various resources are employed, how they are deployed, how they are integrated effectively in such a way that your competitors cannot imitate. That is competencies. So the strategic capability is made up of resources and competencies of the organization. And when you are able to achieve this, then you can have sustainable competitive advantage. So you realize that it is not all of the firm's resources and capabilities that have potential to be the basis of sustained competitive advantage. Your resources and capabilities will give you an advantage when four conditions have been met. Your resources and capabilities must be rare, they must be valuable, they must not be easily imitated, and they must not be substitutable. So we call it VRIN, V-R-I-N. V means valuable resources. Your resources must be rare. Your resources must not be easily imitated, and your resources must not be easily substituted. So when these conditions are met, then you can say that you can have a sustainable competitive advantage. How can your resources, how you know that your resources are valuable? Your resources are valuable when they allow the firm to exploit opportunities and neutralize the threats in the external environment. Your resources can be rare when they are possessed by few, if any. And then also, they are perfectly inimitable when other firms cannot obtain them. And finally, your resources are non-substitutable when they have no strategic equivalent. When these criteria are met, then we can say that resources and capabilities become core competencies and serve as the basis for a firm's sustainable competitiveness and its ability to earn above average profit. Okay, now the question is, how can you have resources and capabilities that are valuable, rare, not easily imitated, and non-substitutable? You can only achieve this when we have what we call core competencies. When you have core competencies, it is not every business that has core competencies in all areas. Of course, every business has some amount of core competencies, but you must have core competencies in several areas. Those businesses within a particular industry, those businesses that have core competencies in more areas are likely to have sustainable competitive advantage, and for that matter, higher performance. So we must have some areas of core competencies. For instance, superior skills in producing high capability. You may have a core competence in producing high quality products. So within the industry, if you are leading in terms of quality, of course you are likely to attract more customers. But customers are not looking for only quality. They are also looking at superior system for delivering customer orders accurately and safely. Yes, I come to your restaurant and your food is nice. You are number one in the industry. But I come to sit down there, 2 hours, I'm not being served. Even though you have high quality products, your food is nice, because I have to wait for over 2 hours before I am served, I will not be ready to to stay for your food, because during lunchtime I'm also working and I have 30 minutes for break. I come to your restaurant because the food is good, and then I sit down for 2 hours to be served. My manager will not allow me to do that. Because of that, I will not come to you. I'll rather go to your competitor whose quality matches you, even though it is not up to your standard, but can serve me as early as I want. So whilst having superior skills in producing quality, you must also have superior system for delivering customer orders and accuracy. If that is not there, it means that you lack core competence in that area. In this case, your competitors is going to take customers from you. Better after sales service capability. There are some companies, after paying them, they have ended their transactions with you. It means they lack core competence in the area of after sales service capability. There are some companies that will follow you, call you to find out how you have experienced the product, whether you are happy with their product. In some electronic industry, or those companies selling electronic products or machines, they will, after selling the product to you, they can give you 1 year or 2 year manufacturer's warranty. They can give you installation, and they can give you 1 year free service. That is what you call after sales service capability. You have 1 year, 2 year manufacturer's warranty. The contract involves supply and installation. They will come and install for you. They will do free delivery within 1 year. If you have any problem, they will come and do free service for you. Some companies are doing well in that area, and therefore they have core competence in that area, whilst others will not do it. In this case, they lack core competence in that area. More skills in achieving low operating costs. There are some managers, before they will be able to increase quality, their costs will go up by 20% or 100%. There are others who will try to increase quality at the same time, bringing costs down with the use of an appropriate technology. In this case, we can say they have more core competence when it comes to cost reduction, without necessarily affecting the quality of the product or service. Unique formula for selecting a good retail location. Unusual innovativeness in developing new products. Some companies will come out with new products. If you take the music industry, there are some people who will come out with a new album. It will take about 5 years before they can come out with another one. There are some others that every 6 months they come out with a new album. Innovativeness in developing a new product, that is a core competence. Better merchandising and product display skills. Superior mastery of an important technology. Unusually effective sales force. These are all areas of core competence. So you realize that it is not all businesses or all companies that are doing well in all of these areas of core competencies. Some may be doing well in 2 or 3, others may be doing well in almost all of them. And those companies that are able to perform well in most areas of core competencies, they will be able to have sustainable competitive advantage. In going through all this, as a manager, what you need to do is to identify areas that you have a weakness and the areas that you have a strength. Just like the external environmental analysis, when we were looking at it, we were looking at areas where there are opportunities and areas where there are threats. So in doing the internal analysis, you also identify your weaknesses and you identify your strengths. For example, when it comes to unusually effective sales force, do you have a weakness there or you have a strength there? Superior mastery of important technology. Do you have a weakness there or you have a strength there? More skills in achieving low operating costs. Do you have a weakness or you have a strength? Unique formula in developing, selecting a good retail location. Do you have a weakness or you have a strength? Unusual innovativeness in developing new products. Do you have a weakness or you have a strength? When it comes to producing quality products, do you have a weakness or you have a strength? So by the time you go through all this, you have a long list of weaknesses and a long list of strengths. So by doing so, the next stage is to put all together. The next stage is to put all together with the external analysis that we did. Then you will be able to perform what we call SWOT analysis. So the key strategic message from both the environment and concerning strategic capability can be summarized in the form of a SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis summarizes the key issues from the business environment and the strategic capability of an organization that are most likely to impact on strategy development. So SWOT analysis is not a replacement of the external and internal analysis. It's rather a summary of the two. So whilst going through the external analysis, you identify your opportunities and threats. In the internal analysis, you identify the strengths and the weaknesses. So we put the two together to form a SWOT analysis. The aim, the SWOT analysis draws together keys, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that have been highlighted as a result of the environmental audit, that is external analysis and the internal analysis. The aim of the SWOT analysis is to turn the weaknesses to strengths and to turn the threat to opportunities. The aim of the SWOT analysis is to use your strength to exploit opportunities in the business environment, and then also try to mitigate against the threat coming from the external environment. So the SWOT, alternatively known as WhatsApp analysis, is an important tool in enabling organizations to distill the findings of the audit into a more cohesive and succinct model. It is essential that it is used for this purpose and that it is as an addition to the environmental audit, not a replacement. So the aim, as I said, the aim of the SWOT process is to enable you to convert weaknesses into strengths and threats into opportunities. So for instance, during the internal analysis, you realize that your front desk staff have poor communication skills, or they have poor attitude towards your customers. You have identified that as a weakness. In doing the SWOT, the aim of your strategy is to turn that weakness to strength. So what do? You need to organize training for these people. By training them, you are converting that weakness into area of strength. Again, during the analysis, internal analysis, you identify that your sales have been going down because the customer service within the organization is weak and you are driving your customers away. You need to train all your employees in customer service activities so that they will be able to deal with the customers in a more appropriate way, thereby reversing the falling in sales within the organization. So that is, in a nutshell, the SWOT analysis. As I indicated earlier on, within the external analysis, the opportunities and threats are what we call uncontrollable factors. So the uncontrollable factors come under opportunities and threats. The uncontrollable factors, because as the manager you do not have control over them. Within the internal analysis, the weaknesses and strengths are the controllable factors. In this case, the manager has control over them, and therefore you can take appropriate decision to reverse the trend in these areas. So the internal factors are the controllable factors, and the external factors are the uncontrollable factors.